Good evening. It is our last night here in Barcelona, so I thought I'd get you all together, Sam Collins, Jolyon Palmer, Lawrence Barretto, to discuss what we have seen over the last few days in Barcelona. So we're going to start with Haas. Looking back over the 3 days, there have been some issues, and I'm going to ask you, Sam, about those, because it's been quite technical. They've been stopping and having to spend time in the garage, haven't they?
Yeah, it seems that the car isn't quite happy at being bolted together. They've had quite a few. They've had a fluid leak. They've had a fuel pump issue. I'm not sure what today's issue was, but it kept them in the garage for most of the afternoon. So they've had quite a few problems with that car, which is the shame, because that is, for me, one of the most interesting cars on the grid. They used that big advantage they had on wind tunnel time to have all sorts of little aerodynamic elements on that have got everybody in the pit lane just looking at that car going, oh, there's a good idea for our car. So I think you'll see quite a few people copying some of the Haas ideas, but if they get that car working, it could be really competitive. So I want to see what it can do.
Okay, so one to watch in Bahrain when we go testing, and of course the guys now in their second year of Formula One, Jolyon, so they need that track time to prove themselves.
And they haven't had it so far. Mick, day two actually looked pretty good in the Haas. I was giving Sam a bit of jip for the old Haas is the most developed car on the
he's quite
grid
bold
line
with that statement on the first morning.
It looked all right on day two. So I think for me, I hope that they can get to the midfield. The driver lineup's obviously still inexperienced. Mick showed that he's got some pace in there. Maybe Nikita Mazepin can get towards his teammates' level as well, but they're really behind on mileage.
Well, let's now look at Alfa Romeo. It has been a difficult few days for them, trying to blend in with their camouflage livery, but it has kind of stood out that there hasn't been much lappage, I'm going to call it, for Valtteri Bottas. Of course, new team for him, new teammate and new driver to Formula One, Guan Yu Zhou as well. Lawrence, what have you made of what you have seen of the Alfa Romeo?
I felt really sorry for Valtteri. 3 days of running, he's managed 54 laps. Most people got that in half a day. With Zhou, I've been really impressed at how he just got down to business. He's had the better run here, and hopefully, if he can get up to speed pretty quickly, could be someone to watch.
And of course, Jolyon, you know what it's like to join the Formula One circus and go out there on your first session when it's really counting. How would he have been feeling this week, and how well has he done therefore?
Nervous, I think, really apprehensive, but he's done okay. I was out there when he was doing his first laps and he looked pretty tentative, I have to say. Natural for a rookie, especially when his teammate hadn't really given any laps to the car either. So yeah, he built up, he got down to an alright pace. Valtteri, I think he barely managed 50 laps across the 3 days. He did a couple of laps that looked okay, but at least, I mean, in some ways, Zhou getting the laps is good. In other ways, he could have done with the lead driver getting it to get a feel on the car. So swings and roundabouts. Not great overall.
Hopefully more to come. Sam, I'm going to move on to Williams now. When we came into the 3 days running here in Barcelona, people were talking about how Williams had gone in a bit of a different direction. Has that come to the sort of forefront at the moment? And what are you thinking of their design?
Yeah, I'm really interested. I'm intrigued by that car. There's a lot of interesting details on it. The team is doing a huge amount of aerodynamic evaluation. They did that brilliant thing of absolutely covering the car with some Flovis dye, looking like a 1990s champ car or an early 2000s champ car. Not sure which might be in a Pac West car or something like that, but it looked just...
I'll believe you. It
looked wonderful, but it was actually really interesting because it allowed us to take a really good look at some of the flow around the car. Now, it's got these... they're experimenting in the side pods. They've got these sort of straight-through side pods. You've got the normal cooling duct underneath the side impact structure, but above it, you've got this just hole that you can see right through. You look at the car, you can see daylight coming through the other end. I asked FX de Maison, the technical director of the team, about that, and he went, oh no, there's a cooling element in there. Well, like the Alfa Romeo, that cooling element to my eye seems to be invisible.
Okay, interesting one to keep an eye on. Have you spoken to Alex Albon since he's been back, and what's his verdict on being back in the paddock first and foremost, but also with the Williams team?
Super excited to be back in Formula One.
He's beaming, isn't he? Just like,
yeah, he just hasn't stopped smiling. I saw him at the shakedown and he was excited and he didn't get much on in there, but here he settled in really quickly to Williams. He says George has given him plenty of tips on like how to just get to know the engineers pretty quickly, and
that was handy.
And
very
yeah,
kind.
Exactly,
very kind.
Smart, right? But he's settled in really nicely. He's got a decent amount of laps in here. The team love him already. He gets on really well with Nicky, so there's a really nice dynamic for him in there.
And they switched this morning. We obviously had the wet running in the afternoon and then the dry running in the morning, but you were quite surprised that they put Albon and Latifi in the morning.
They changed mid-morning, yeah. People change halfway through the day, but halfway through the morning, Williams changed. I think because there was some wet weather running in the afternoon and they wanted to give both drivers a good feel, but they've had a decent crack. When they put Latifi in the car, it did 5 laps, like one flying lap, and then they were back in the garage for a couple of hours. So something obviously wasn't quite right there, and he missed out a bit today. But Alex, yeah, good, doing well with the team, I think, and he did a decent amount of laps. The car looks all right. So again, I'm hopeful for them that they can get back towards the midfield. And kind of part of the rule change is doing its job in tightening the pack.
Well, another team we're hoping will be in the fight will be Aston Martin. One of the cars that brought out the red flag, it was Sebastian Vettel. What went on there, Sam? Do we know?
Well, smoke came out of it, so I can tell you that. I can't tell you what caused the smoke, and when you see these incidents in pre-season events, I don't really trust what technical directors necessarily tell you about what's gone wrong. There's the old line that smoke's pouring out of the engine. It's an electrical problem. Piston's gone through the wiring loom, and it's stuff like that. I mean, that's a bit of an old cliche, but it's true. You can't really trust what teams will necessarily tell you about what's gone wrong. However, that car has been struggling all the way through this test. They've had really, really bad porpoising. It's been thumping its way along the straights. It just doesn't look as together. It seems to be struggling all the way around the track. The team don't seem as confident and optimistic as they did when the car was first launched, and I think they're in a few little difficulties there.
You've been track-sighted. What have you made of it up close like that?
A bit like that, really.
Yeah.
There was a bit of hype. It was the first launch, and everyone was very excited about it. And I was looking forward to seeing what they could do. They were obviously, it was Racing Point very good before, difficult year, and I thought this would be a bit of a reset. It doesn't look great on track. It looks quite aggressive, quite spiky, difficult to drive. I think Lance Stroll seems to be struggling a little bit more than Seb in it as well. Maybe a bit of experience helping Seb to overcome some difficulties there, but I'm not thrilled by it in terms of moving towards the front of the midfield.
Is that the kind of attitude you're getting from the drivers? Have you spoken to them this week?
Yeah, I thought Lance in early pre-season was actually quite chatty and really felt up for this season, and similar to Valtteri, it's just dropped a little bit. But I remember when they launched, they were saying they don't want to go down design cul-de-sacs today, so it might just be that they've got a real baseline and then they've got opportunities to develop out of it.
AlphaTauri, bit of a moment for Pierre Gasly. What happened there? Did he just lose it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Just walking around the track and I found him in the wall.
Yeah, you were right. You were right there at the right time.
Yeah, for once. And it was. There's not been many red flags, but that was the start of 2 driver errors, which is not a huge amount for 3 days. But yeah, Pierre was one of them. Experienced driver now, and put the car in the wall. Didn't get going again on day 3. It looks okay on track. It's sort of fairly middling for me. AlphaTauri, Yuki's been in the car as well. They've had decent mileage until day 3. Looks all right.
I feel out of the car. I said to Yuki, I feel like you've grown in confidence. And he said, yeah, I was out of control last year. So I feel like he's taken the winter break to kind of go, center myself, let's go again. Do you agree?
Really good self-awareness though, isn't it,
Yeah.
I think? And Franz has really worked over the winter to try and settle him down a little bit. And every time you talk to Franz, he was like, just keep giving him a chance. And it's good that he's got really good mileage here. That will help settle those nerves as he goes into this year, because he knows he's got to kick off really strongly this season.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of pressure on them to perform last year, and I think Franz will be wanting that result this year. We move on to Alpine. Those are my sounds. What are your words?
Pretty much the same until. So those are the sounds that are coming out of the Alpine team as well. They were
and out of the car at one point.
Better than the car today.
The car wasn't particularly happy with itself today, but the team weren't particularly happy with the car on day 1 and day 2. In fact, they were looking really disgruntled. You'd see them sitting on the stairs eating lunch, just, heads down.
I kept on saying, I'm walking through your picnic zone. Yeah, it was all a bit awkward.
They didn't look very happy. The mechanics didn't seem happy. The drivers definitely weren't happy. The car was bouncing around like it was on a merry-go-round. I hear on their shakedown, bits of the car were literally falling off it and had to be taped on for the test sessions, and they're worried about going forwards into Bahrain. Less so, though, because overnight they found something, and the car started to go quickly on day 3. So quickly, in fact, that the new power unit said, no, I've had enough of this. And,
just a few laps for me this season.
Fernando was very happy with the few laps it managed before it expired. But that car goes into the Bahrain test looking, well, the team are now, they've gone from disgruntled to optimistic. They're happy. They're really looking forward to getting to Bahrain and seeing what their car can finally actually do.
So long as that something wasn't like taking out 50 kilos of fuel.
Yes,
because
yeah.
They were really down in the dumps early on, and Fernando Alonso, this is maybe the big year for him and the big rule change. And I got the impression that them, a little bit with Aston Martin, were not particularly happy, but hey, it's early days. There's still the Bahrain testing to come, and maybe those two are playing it cool. Maybe, as Sam said, they found a little bit of something at the end. Only had 12 laps to find it out. But hopefully the two of them can kick on in Bahrain.
Yeah, we want a happy Alonso, don't we? We don't want any disgruntled radio messages. Okay, we move on to McLaren. Interesting segue. Let's have a little think about those cars, because they were troubling the top of the timesheets, weren't they? And you said that they were ones to watch early doors.
Yeah, I like them. I went out early on day one. First glimpse of the car, and it was the McLaren coming towards me, Lando at the wheel into turn 7, left-hander, and he just turned it in, hooked it up in apex. I thought these cars are really nice, actually. I thought they'd be a bit more cumbersome, and it turned out the McLaren particularly was looking really nice at that point. Lando was hooked up from the word go, really. I think he's carried on some momentum, and it just looks really looks like he could place the car really well, could turn it in, the rear end's holding, but he's got a bit of sharpness and directness at the front of the McLaren. And he's going well. My
worry for them, sorry to put a downer on it, I know he said don't sort of over-egg it at the beginning of the week. Last year they came out strong, and then it slightly ebbed away. But because of these new cars, is that going to happen again? What are you getting from Lando and Daniel?
I mean, possibly. It kind of that becomes a development race, doesn't it? And what the resources they've got to keep up with it. But I think Lando's grown in so much confidence, and he signed that mega deal over the winter, and he's kind of got an extra spring in his step, I think, walking around this place. And I think Daniel's benefited from the time he's had off during the winter, spending time with his family. And I do think he's in a better shape than he was this time last year.
And in terms of what they've brought to Barcelona, Sam, have you had a good look at the McLaren design?
I've had a great look at it. They're one of the teams that haven't been very secretive. They've been having their bodywork off, making adjustments, let me look all over the car. It's quite wonderful. I'm really enjoying it. They've got a pull rod front suspension. I was asking them, why have you gone that way? And I had a good chat with James Key, the technical director there. And he literally described these new rules and working to them as great fun. He's really enjoying these 2022 technical regulations. He seemed very, very happy with his product. He has said that all the problems that a lot of teams are suffering with, the porpoising, yeah, McLaren have suffered that too, but they're working through a program and they think they've got around it. They found a way through it. That car just seems to be together. It seems to be working. All the work that was going on in the garage on that car just seemed to be planned work. It wasn't failures, it was adjustments and tweaks and just trying to see how they can make the best out of it. But they were just running through their program, getting on with it. And actually I feel the engineers are putting a bit of pressure on the drivers, because they've turned up with a car that's competent, it's good and sorted, and the drivers can drive it. And now the drivers, everyone's talking about them in well, like you guys were saying that, well, these guys have got a chance of winning something there.
Lando was diffusing that big time at the end of the
yeah.
Take the pressure off.
I wanted to be last.
Win, guys. We're definitely not going to win.
Ever the cool one, Lando Norris. By contrast, we look at Ferrari. Of course, they were battling last year for P3. Matteo Binotto saying he wants to allow the Tifosi to feel pride in Ferrari again. Do we think this could be a good year for them?
I mean, they're doing a really good job of playing things down, but doing it in such a way that you can see they're actually reasonably confident with how things have gone. Even the drivers are quite pleased with how quickly they've got up to speed. And talking to Matteo today, when he was talking about the development program that they've worked on and the risk that they've taken and being brave, I think there was some doubt that they maybe had been too brave, and I think that's rode back, and I think they're pretty confident with where they're at the moment.
Because, of course, last year there were weekends when Matteo Binotto was back at Maranello really focusing on this year's car, so hopefully that's going to pay dividends. And we know that the drivers are really impressed with the trajectory of the team. If you were a Ferrari driver this year, would you be kind of thinking, hey, this could be championship territory?
I'd be excited.
Yeah.
I'd be really excited, particularly from where they've come from the last couple of years. This is Ferrari. They fought for championships recently, but they have had a really tough couple of years. And again, like I said, Lando and McLaren look hooked up. Ferrari look hooked up from the word go. Both drivers with slightly different styles, I have to say, but looking really good. Charles Leclerc, he looks like he's larging the car. He's got so much confidence. But in previous years, when the Ferrari gets a bit out of shape, you're thinking, uh-oh, he's about to crash. But now they're getting out of shape and they can still lean on it. I think they've, particularly Leclerc, he's sort of got these slight drifts on the corner exits, and it looks like he's got confidence in the car, and it's not as snappy. And Carlos looks to be a little bit smoother, but he's still getting some good pace out of the car. Reliability's been superb for them as well. So much mileage. I think Ferrari maybe are the happiest team of the test so far for me.
And also watching Charles Leclerc in the press conference earlier in the week, other drivers are a little coy to kind of nail colours to the mast and say, yeah, I'm liking the cars, I'm liking what I've got. Charles was very open. I'm enjoying this, wasn't he? I was kind of impressed that he was able to come out and say that.
It's confident because most people are playing it down. You don't know what everyone else is doing. It's only pre-season, and it's true. The fuel loads, the engine modes, the times need to be taken with a relative pinch of salt. But I do think body language speaks quite a lot. You guys would pick it up as well a lot from sort of post-session and the press conferences. And if Charles effusive about the Ferrari are punchy with their ambitions, it all adds up nicely, I think, for them at the moment.
We now move to Red Bull and, of course, our reigning world champion, Max Verstappen. What have they got? What have they brought, Sam? Because there's been a lot of chat about their side pods, and has Adrian Newey done it again? Has he brought something miraculous?
I mean, they've gone a route. Everybody's been talking about the RB18 as like this miraculous car. It's completely different. It's radical. Yeah, it's an interesting car. It's got some really nice features on it. The side pods are one, but this is a team that was developing a car right up to the end of the 2021 World Championship to try and win that title, which they did with their driver. However, that means they had to sacrifice some of the development on the 2022 car. And I think you can see that in some elements. Some parts of the car are not as developed as on, say, the Haas, for example, or even the McLaren. But they have taken some radical design decisions, like those side pods, pull rod front suspension again, really interesting floor entry tunnels. That's going to be one of the big talking points of the season. They're the bits that stick out just behind the front wheels. That's one of the keys to the designs of these cars, and they've taken quite an interesting route around that. I was staring up them quite earlier. The team weren't particularly happy.
You told them.
Yeah, I was looking where I probably shouldn't have done, but I was having a nice good look. So that car does look like a very good Adrian Newey sort of esque idea, but we've seen that in early sets of rule changes. Adrian Newey either absolutely nails it or goes a bit too brave, and that creates problems for the car. Now, we have seen a bit of pace from it, but through the test they've been a little anonymous, and I didn't get the confidence from them that I've seen in previous seasons. Also, I just feel that while everybody's looking at the side pods, it's the floor edge that people should be looking at, and that's how you try and get the big performance out of these cars. And the Red Bull doesn't look as developed as other cars, but I will caveat that by saying you can't look at a car and tell what the airflow's doing unless you've got a wind tunnel or a CFD. You're just making it up.
Well, we've seen flaws going in and out for Red Bull over the course of the few days. I spoke to Sergio just after the wet weather session, and he was sort of explaining that with the porpoising effect, it's going to be very difficult to maximise a weekend in terms of quali and race. And Jolene, can you just explain a little bit more about how that's going to play into the drivers having to deal with that?
Well, the porpoising's been a headache for everyone to a various degree, and they basically need to try and set the car up so it's not porpoising, ideally. The problem is you want to have the car as low as possible, and when you start a race and you've got a full tank of fuel, you've got lower tyre pressures as well to start, it's going to sit a bit lower down. So Parc Fermé rules mean you can't change the car between quali and the race. So essentially what Checo's saying is they're going to have to jack the car up slightly more in qualifying so that they're not qualifying it well and then just porpoising like mad in the early laps, and that would be a nightmare, because imagine going into turn one, first lap, cars all around you, and you barely see where you're going. So that's what he's talking about, and there will be a bit of a trade-off, but it will also be the same for everyone at that point. So probably everyone will have to make the same compromise and sort of have the ride height or the suspension stiffness or whatever they're doing to adapt it set for kind of the start of the race, I think.
Now, I was thinking about this since we had a conversation over there about this, and a little idea has just glinted into my head, because you're absolutely right. If you go well in qualifying, you've sacrificed your main Grand Prix. But this season, there's 3 sprints. And those F1 sprints could actually provide a real opportunity to some team that wanted to go brave and go for the points that you can get in the F1 sprint if you sacrifice the Grand Prix itself. So you run the car in a condition that actually will porpoise like crazy in the early stages and could cause damage in the early stages of the Grand Prix, the full 300-kilometre race. But in the 1/3 distance, 100-kilometre sprint, that actually could be not too bad, because the car's running much lighter, you can run the car a little bit lower, and if you go for that approach, you really could get a little bit of an unexpected result in a few of those sprint events. So I would keep an eye on some of the midfield teams trying something a little bit brave, and it means they've sacrificed their race. Now, you won't see Red Bull doing that, I can guarantee you, but their sister team, AlphaTauri, keep an eye on them.
Okay, well, let's move to Mercedes, the reigning Constructors' champions. Lewis Hamilton topping the timesheets on day 3. George Russell also right up there, but both of them kind of saying don't read too much into the times. You had a chat with Lewis.
Yeah, he was
Expand.
playing it down big time. Like, he'd just gone quickest today on the timesheets. He backed off massively on his last lap and could have gone even quicker. And he came out and he was like, "Oh yeah, it was all right. Like, we've had a few obstacles."
But I find this
He
weird.
played it
He's
down
like,
massively.
this year I'm going to be even better, everybody, basically. Watch out at the launch, wasn't he? So he's like fighting talk then, and then now it's like, no, not.
Just wants to rein it back in. Doesn't want to get too excited. Whereas I thought George took a slightly different approach earlier this week when he was talking about Ferrari and McLaren and putting the pressure on them and saying, "Oh look, these guys look really strong. We're probably a little bit behind." But did it with because he used to be a terrible poker player.
Yeah.
He does it with that twinkle in his eye, that little smirk. And I just don't think that he thinks it's as bad as he was saying it's going to be.
Well, he's racing back to the simulator. He's going back to Brackley, as I'm sure a lot of drivers will be in the run-up to the Bahrain test. But in terms of Mercedes managing to take another world title, from what you see, is there any signs that this could be a really hot car for them?
It's not going to be a cold car from Mercedes.
Oh, thank you very much.
Let's
Well, as
start with
Lewis
that.
says, they don't make mistakes, didn't he? He was bold. He said, "My team don't make mistakes," in the press conference today.
Well, on that topic, they are the one team that have done practice starts fairly relentlessly from day 2 morning. And every time I could hear a car going out of the pit lane, if it was doing burnouts in a practice start,
He was playing a game.
That would be Mercedes. Because everyone else was just driving out and getting on with it. But they're obviously thinking bigger picture early on. They were the first, Lewis was the first driver at the end to do some sort of race simulation run. I think only Alex Albon really did anything similar in the Williams. They did run the C5 tyre to top the times at the end, the softest tyre. For what that's worth, maybe they had a load of fuel in it, it's difficult to know. But they seem like they're trying to prepare all bases at the moment. The car, I don't think the drivers seem super happy with it. But hey, I thought they'd have a tougher year last year than they did. They could have won it. And I'm not going to rule them out. I think they're going to be right there again.
And of course, last year in Bahrain, they were struggling and then they bounced right back. So we can't rule them out. You'd be a fool too.
You'd be a fool to rule out Mercedes. You do have to be aware, though, they had the smallest wind tunnel allowance of any team in Formula One. So they haven't been able to develop the car as much as some of the other teams. So it's innovation and smart thinking that will put them to the front, not technical and aerodynamic development. So they're going to be a bit on the back foot in that sense. As you said, we've seen the car struggle in the past in testing and they come along with something really good. I don't think they're going to have the ability to react as quickly as they have in the past, just because of that aerodynamic testing restriction and the cost cap, which is going to be a big factor. So they're not going to be able to throw as much at the car as they have done in the past.
But you want your struggles now, don't you? You want to be struggling in Barcelona, you want to be struggling in Bahrain, so you can get all your wheels in motion.
Yeah,
To sort it
if
out.
you're going to struggle at some point, the not filmed Barcelona pre-testing test is going to be the time to do it. But it is just that, really. The official pre-season test is in Bahrain. All these cars we're trying to dissect, they could all look really different in Bahrain, and this is all null and void. There's a lot of time before the first
keep
race.
watching, though. Keep watching.
This is still fascinating, but is ever-moving goal, especially with the new generation.
There's only one team that have told me they're not going to bring a big update to Bahrain, and that's Ferrari, which in itself is quite interesting. So I think I'll let people judge from that what they like, but for me, it could be a really good day for the red teams.
What does Sebastian Vettel once say? Ferrari is back. Could that be something we'll hear Charles or Carlos say this year?
Oh, it'd be great, wouldn't it, for the sport, I think. But also to see those two drivers who are among the most young and up-and-coming drivers to go at it. Be interesting to see how they actually interact if they are fighting together for big positions week in, week out.
Yeah, it's going to be an awesome season. We've had 3 days of running here in Barcelona. If you've got to the end of this video, it may actually be time to go testing in Bahrain. That was a wonderful wrap-up, guys. Sam Collins, Jolyon Palmer, Lawrence Barretto, thank you so much. You can probably hear they're packing up here in Barcelona because it's finally time to head to the desert for the official test in Bahrain. We hope you will join us there. Goodbye.